back there. Genesis 41, if you will. Great, Grace, I love when y'all sing that. I think it's wonderful. It's a good song, but it's better when people sing the song, all right? So Genesis 41, and we're going to cover a lot of ground today. The goal is not to have a full exposition of the chapter, but as we look at the life of Joseph, he's had a lot of bad things happen. You ever have bad days where you feel like it's just never going to get better? I feel like that's just Joseph. Like it's just where he's at. He's been going through a lot, and every time he goes through something, it seems like something gets worse, and something gets worse. He's thrown into a pit. Sounds like it's pretty bad, but then he's sold to Ishmaelites, and then he's sold to Potiphar, and he's framed by Potiphar's wife, and then thrown into prison, then made to serve a butler and a baker, and then he's forgotten by that said butler, and it seems like things just get worse and worse, and there's no hope in sight. But eventually we understand that he goes through these things for a reason. It's interesting, in the life of Christ, I was preaching a message on the life of Christ from the book of Luke when Jesus immediately departed into the wilderness. And anyways, after his baptism, he goes into the wilderness, and he's there for some time, 40 days and 40 nights. And I had mentioned something that I said I don't understand why he went into it, and there's some reasons. But if you look at the life of Jesus, you look at the life of Moses, you look at the life of Joseph, and you look at all these people in the Scriptures, there's always that time period of wilderness wanderings, isn't there? It just keeps, with everybody, it seems like David himself. David is anointed king. To me, that's a pretty big deal. More than likely, a teenager is being anointed as the king. And even as a teenager, when he's anointed as king, what happens? He goes back to take care of sheep. And he still has to run errands for his dad. And then finally, he gets some prominence, and then he's on the run from the king for some time. And it takes years. It takes years before he finally becomes the king there over Israel. And so just one thing after another. So anyways, as I'm looking at this, the question is why? Why is that? And it seems that the Scriptures point out some element of trying, some element of preparation for the work that God is going to do through these individuals that are there. Why did he allow Joseph to go through those things? Ultimately, what we do find is that God has an end game. He has something he's going to do with the life of Joseph. This, what we'll see in chapter 41 is a part of it. We'll start seeing where things get better for his life, but ultimately there's something that God wants Joseph to accomplish, and he's going to take him through a lot of difficulty to get there. And while it doesn't seem like it be a desirable path, we understand that God puts his children through the crucible of fire so we can be the vessels of mercy at his hand eventually one day. Joseph will eventually save a whole bunch of people. Think about it, the people that threw him into the pit, the people that sold him into slavery, his own brothers. It's no doubt gave him a hard time when he was home, right? I mean, I would imagine they would. It's unlikely that they really respected him and just favored him kindly and bought him nice gifts, and his birthdays were probably just extravagant because of all his big brothers taking care of baby brother. It wasn't like they didn't like the guy, all right? So they scoffed. They didn't like him. They avoided him at all costs. And anyways, he goes through much, but the people that causes suffering would be eventually the ones whom he saves. So think about what Joseph is. Joseph will eventually save the people that causes suffering. Who would have thought that? The mercy of God demonstrated to this group of people in an extreme way, and he's going to use Joseph for that. And so anyways, we're going to see here in this passage of Scripture what happens. Let's go ahead and get started because we're covering a lot of ground today. Genesis 41, and we're going to start all the way back in verse number 1. I'll try not to speak too quickly. My coffee should be wearing off by now. So verse number 1, and it came to pass. That's a good phrase, and it came to pass. That's encouraging, isn't it? Why? Because he's currently in prison. He's done good things. He's interpreted dreams, and it came to pass. There's a phrase that I hear a lot of people say, or they'll post it online, or they'll get tattoos of it. I've seen it a number of times in tattoos. This too shall pass. Sounds really good and biblical. It's actually not a Bible verse, but it's based off this idea, and it came to pass. The idea is it's going to happen. It came to pass. Something has transpired until it comes to pass, and this is what we're desiring. We want God to bring to pass what we want him to bring to pass. All those things eventually will happen, and it's those times that we wait. The kids were excited about camp. I mean, they were like nuts. They were excited to go to camp, and part of the excitement had to do with the fact that last year they couldn't go to camp, and so they got excited, and it got canceled just last minute. And they couldn't go. It was very, very sad, but now they were ready. Last year, I'm trying to think of who was, Bariah. Bariah was he was thrilled beyond belief to go to camp. And then we said, no, nobody can go to camp. And so global pandemic. Well, I guess that is a pandemic. That's a global, right? But anyways, that happened, and so they had to shut down camp. And now, well, anyways, they got to go. They were so excited, and every single day in anticipation of that, they were just, Lily would wake up every morning. I'm going to camp in 5 days. I'm going to camp in 3 days. I'm going to camp tomorrow. And we finally got to the day she woke up that day. She had gone to sleep kind of late that Sunday night and woke up early on Monday. I'm going to camp today. And she was a camper this week, and so very excited about it. It came to pass. So we look forward to, and the point on the passage here is that Joseph finally is going to have this event that's going to take place, and it came to pass. You should be reminded of the fact that it'll come to pass. God is going to do what he's going to do. It shall come to pass. And so anyways, we'll continue reading, and it came to pass at the end of 2 full years that Pharaoh dreamed, and behold, and he stood by the river. Remember, he had told the butler interpretation, told the butler, remember me, and the butler forgot. Took 2 years later, Pharaoh dreams a dream. Notice what the dream is. Behold, he stood by the river. So there he is, bank. Verse number 2, and behold, there came up out of the river 7 well-favored kine, and fat-fleshed, and they fed in a meadow. So let's just look at these 7 cows that are big, fat cows. Do you want your cow to be a big, fat cow? And anyways, these are good. This is like Kobe beef style cows that are just standing there. Have you ever heard of those Kobe cows? It's incredible. They're like massaged and fed and all sorts of stuff, and like they eat better than we do. And they're supposed to be like the fattiest, not like just fat lines going through there like gristly. We're talking about like just an evenly placed fat throughout all their muscles, and so it's just a incredible amount of meat. In fact, I saw it for sale one time, and it was on sale for $900 for a piece of New York strip that was not cooked, okay? And so that is something that's the closest I ever got to. It was seen in a package at a distance, because I will never buy Kobe beef. If anybody wants to buy me Kobe beef, I'd be willing to try it, but I would never spend it. Spend the money. So anyway, so you have this Kobe cattle or whatever. They're these well-favored kind, these ones that have been taken care of, and they're fat-fleshed, and they fed in a meadow, so they're eating freely. Verse number 3, and behold, 7 other kind came up after them out of the river, ill-favored. They didn't look good, and lean flesh. They were skinny little cows, and not like the brand skinny cow, but and stood by the other kind upon the brink of the river. So they walk up next to the other cows. Verse 4, and the ill-favored and lean-fleshed kind did eat up the 7 well-favored and fat kind. So Pharaoh awoke, all right? It's kind of a serene picture. You have this meadow, this beautiful meadow, these happy cows. You know, I'm sure they're black and white cows, and I don't know what kind of cows they are, but they're beautiful and happy, and you can tell they're well taken care of, and they're eating the beautiful grass and sunshine and butterflies and everything. And then these out of the river, which the rivers represent something good, right? But from the river comes out these other 7 cows, and these 7 cows walk up, kind of nasty looking, up to these other cows, and they eat them. What a twisted story, you know? It just kind of goes well until, boom, everything goes terrible. What a twist of events. So finally, that wakes Pharaoh up. That kind of makes him panic. And I can't believe those cows ate the other cows. Weird things happen in dreams. You know, you ever had weird things happen? I told you about the dream of Leo driving around last week. So anyways, this one, people asked, by the way, several people asked, how was his driving? It was really good. He actually maintained his lane, used his turn signal, remember, when he took a left. And so anyways, the point is that when it came to these cows, these cows shocked him as far as what's going on. This represents the food, obviously, so this is a lot. And anyways, it continues on here. So he goes back to sleep, verse 5, and he slept and dreamed a second time. And behold, 7 ears of corn came up upon one stalk, rank and good. So these are big, fat ears of corn. And behold, 7 thin ears, and blasted with the east wind, sprung up after them. And so imagine some little dehydrated corn stalks that are like browned, and you can tell they're in bad shape. And the 7 thin ears devoured the 7 rank and full ears, and Pharaoh awoke, and behold, it was a dream. And it came to pass in the morning that his spirit was troubled, and he sent and called for all the magicians of Egypt, and all the wise men thereof, and Pharaoh told them his dream, but there was none that could interpret them unto Pharaoh. Then spake the chief butler unto Pharaoh, saying, I do remember my faults this day. Oh yeah, oops. Verse 10, Pharaoh was wroth with his servants, and put me in ward in the captain of the guard's house, both me and the chief baker, and we dreamed a dream, and one night I and he, we dreamed each man according to the interpretation of his dream, and there was there with us a young man, a Hebrew servant of the captain of the guard, and we told him, and he interpreted to us our dreams, to each man according to his dream he did interpret. And it came to pass, as he interpreted to us, so it was, me he restored into mine office, and him he hanged. And so he told the story of the butler and the baker from chapter number 40. Now, ultimately, what's been happening is Joseph has been locked up for quite some time now. We understand he left the promised land, left the area where his father had been abiding, Jacob had been abiding, Israel had been abiding, the area they're supposed to be in. But then Joseph, at 17 years of age, gets sold into slavery. He hangs around in the house of Potiphar for some time. Then he's going to be in prison for a while. And now he's 30 years old. At 30 years of age, he's still considered a young man. Don't you love the Bible calls him the young man at 30? My daughter's asked about 25. Is 25 young? Yes, 25 is a child still. And so it's very, very young. In fact, the Bible also calls Aaron a young man when he's 40. So think about that, you 30-some-year-olds. And so I've got years of youngness, okay? Now, it does say certain people are old, and the Bible has a number on that as well, but that's for a different preacher to mention. Okay, so anyways, when it comes to that, we have the scriptures that are telling us that Joseph is a young guy. He's 30 years old. Now, 30 years old seems like young, but except for he spent almost half his life in some kind of bondage or some kind of servitude or literally in prison for a few years. And so things have not gone incredibly well for him. But at this point, we see this story that progresses now where suddenly an outside force, something happens outside of Joseph's immediate realm, and that is Pharaoh himself. Pharaoh himself is now having dreams. And so what we're going to find is that Joseph is going to be exalted. This is a spoiler alert. Joseph will eventually be exalted. But how did it happen? And this is how it happened. By the choice of God. The reason Joseph was exalted was because God chose for him to be exalted. This is one of God's choice servants. This is somebody that is serving God, and God has a plan for this one that believes on him. It's very important. We've been talking about Calvinism in our Sunday school class, and people often talk about the election before salvation. And we have to remember that God has some sort of predestination, an election for those who are saved, which is reversed, by the way, than what Calvinism teaches. And what we're saying here is that Joseph, as a follower of God, one that believes on him and has demonstrated a life of faith, God says, I've got something for you. And even though it's not gone well, and sometimes we feel as Christians, when we're doing our life as a Christian, that things don't go right, then obviously we must be doing something wrong. Joseph, I wonder, Joseph had the times where he was in prison, thought, well, wait, things aren't going right. Things aren't the way they're supposed to. Maybe that dream didn't mean what it was supposed to, right? What I thought it meant. But ultimately, God had a plan for him, and ultimately, God is working out details for Joseph to be exalted. How does he work it out? He works it out in dreams. Seems to be the pattern of Joseph's life, that there are dreams. It's interesting, many people relate Joseph to what we would call a type of Christ, not literally that he was Christ in the Old Testament, but that his life would reflect a life that was similar to that of Jesus. And there's a lot of mentions of that where we can see how that kind of works out. For instance, Jonah in the Old Testament, he is in the belly of the whale for 3 days and 3 nights, right? That's a prophecy specifically to the death of Jesus Christ. And so we see Old Testament references that point to Jesus. Joseph was similar to that. His brothers, the fathers of these 11 tribes, they sell him. They get rid of him. They betray him. He is tempted. He spends time in the wilderness, and ultimately he will save those who caused his suffering. And so, anyways, he's also 30 years old at this point, which I think is interesting as far as time frame goes. But anyways, in this was something that God did. God is the one that allowed Pharaoh to have these dreams. And the other part is that nobody could help him. Notice that when he had these dreams, that in verse number 8, he asks the magicians and all the wise men of Egypt to help him out. Now, I know this, that when people don't know something, that human nature is make something up, right? We have that, and it happens in other passages of Scriptures. There's one time in which a king of Judah goes up and hangs out with the king of Israel, and they're talking about a battle plan, and the people there, these wise people, are coming up and making stuff up about how they should go forward in battle and they're going to win. Well, one of the guys has this plan where he makes these 2 horns. He says, you go into battle carrying these 2 horns, and if you do so, you'll win. I mean, just making stuff up all over the place. You find this with Nebuchadnezzar as well, that he asked for dreams to be interpreted, and they're making stuff up. And so anyways, here, though, nobody makes anything up. Here in verse number 8 and verse number 9, they're like, we don't know. We have no idea. Now, God stops the mouth even of these wise men, of these magicians. To me, honestly, if you're looking at what the dreams meant, you can kind of guess a little bit, right? You have food, and then you're not going to have it. They're in years of plenty right now. It's going to be good, and it's going to get bad. Okay, we got maybe not the time frame, except that you understand there's seven. There's seven. So you can start making up some ideas like, well, this probably means that. But even the wise men of the kingdom, people that interpret dreams for them, nothing. We got nothing for you. And so there's a stop there. The other part is that when it comes to this, in verse number 9, it comes past that the chief butler, who has been reinstated, he gets his position back to have the ear of Pharaoh. I'm wondering why the butler is around Pharaoh at this point. It could be because Pharaoh decided he wanted to eat something and say, hey, bring me something. Bring me what I like, the stuff I like. And he brings it over, and he's like, I don't really want to eat this stuff. I should have mentioned this a couple of years ago, but I know a guy while I was in jail. And so anyway, the point is that he didn't remember it, though, for 2 years. Why? Why did he not remember it? Because it wasn't time to be remembered. It would be nice if it had been 2 years ago. If I asked Joseph, did you want to stay in jail an extra 2 years before good stuff happened? No, we don't. My daughter, Layla, is she in here? She's okay. All right. I don't want to embarrass her. But when it comes to her teeth, we try to take care of her teeth. I believe that people should brush their teeth and take care of your teeth because God gave them to you. Okay. So anyway, we're giving that to her, and she said, I don't like. We do some stuff for her teeth that she doesn't like. See, they don't like spicy things. You know what spicy things are? Mint flavor or anything like toothpaste has that has like the tingliness. She doesn't like that kind of stuff. And she's using some stuff right now just to help with some of the enamel in her teeth that's like even a harsher taste. And we tried a bunch of different stuff. It doesn't matter. She just doesn't like brushing her teeth. So I said, okay, why? So she had me explain why and how tooth decay works and sugars and the way enamel's eaten off and all that kind of stuff. And so anyways, she said, well, what if I just don't eat any more sugars anymore? I said, okay, deal. If you don't eat any more sugars at all, I will not make you brush your teeth. I said, okay, that sounds, okay, I just want to eat sugars anyway. And then she said, but that means I can't have candy. Right. I said, okay, I won't have candy. And then she said, but tomorrow's church. You guys gave her a lot of candy. And then we're having Candy Bash VBS this week, right? And so anyways, and she realized, okay, I want to do it. Oh, and by the way, these fruits, a lot of those fruits have naturally occurring sugars in them, so you're not going to be able to eat most fruits because that's going to be all settles on your teeth, and that would be bad as well. And so anyways, we start going through. She said, I can't have cake for my birthday. Leo's birthday's coming up soon, and we can't have cake for his birthday. Yeah, you can't have, that's all sugars. But that's a deal. If you don't want to brush your teeth, you cannot have any more sugars anymore. And now, are there other things that cause decay? Absolutely, but we'll just stick with sugars right now. And so she said, fine, I'll brush my teeth. Done. Why? Because she wanted something hard right now so she can have something better later. I said, okay, I'll do this now so I can have something better later. Now we don't choose this, but ultimately God says, hey, I have an exaltation for Joseph. He's going to accomplish the work that I want him to do, but not right now. And sometimes it's hard because, listen, when you're in the middle of that, you have to go through a hard thing. And in the middle of that, we don't like it, but it's where we're at, and God ultimately has something for you in the future. And by the way, it wasn't so Joseph could eventually lavish in luxury so he could just go from the prison to the palace and everything would be wonderful. That's what would happen, but that's not why he was going to go through that. Ultimately, God had a bigger plan. We see this leading on throughout the book of Genesis, that God had a plan for Joseph that would be great for God's glory and to save his people and to do all that work. It wasn't just so Joseph can have all the good stuff and the nice clothes. But ultimately, God had something wonderful for him. And it was not an accident that the butler forgot for 2 years. That Pharaoh had those dreams after 2 years. And also wasn't an accident that Joseph worked for Potiphar. Now, I want you to notice how this worked out. Joseph had to be sold into slavery. He had to have some brothers that hated him. He had to have one that had some mercy on him, not to kill him, to sell him onto a group of Ishmaelites that happened to be traveling through. And so as they're traveling through and they sell him off, they go to Potiphar's house. Because what happens in Potiphar's house, do you realize he had to be betrayed or had to be framed by Potiphar's wife to be put into a jail, because he wasn't put into any jail, but he'd be put into the jail where the royal prisoners were kept. So he's put into a special jail for the people that had to do with royalty and those houses. So he wasn't just put into a local jail. He was put in a certain jail that would put the butler and the baker. And all these circumstances were put together for Joseph to have what was intended for him in the future. God worked out some incredible details. So I want you to think about when you got saved. What were the details about when you got saved? I mean, just think about it. Why were you at the place you were when you even heard the gospel when you got saved? A friend of mine, Ray Watley, and I remember when he got saved, and I've told this story before, but just a powerful story. Ray Watley's grandfather died miserable for him. He loved his grandfather. His grandfather was just his hero. He spent time with him all the time. His grandfather taught him to fish and to do a lot of great things. And anyways, his grandfather was a godly man who loved going to church and tried to encourage Ray to do it all the time. But because his grandfather passed away, Ray's schedule was such that he would miss that funeral, so he changed his work schedule with somebody else, and he had to work on a certain day that he otherwise would have been doing something else. So he took on a day where he wouldn't normally had a day off, and on that day where he's going to work, we knock on his door. I say, well, wait a second, he had to work that day, and you knock on his door? Yes, we knocked on his door. Well, because he had to work that day, he had to be home that morning to get ready to go to work. Otherwise, he would have been out fishing or doing whatever else. So he's home, getting ready to go to work. He had half an hour before he would leave, and a guy knocks on his door from our church and shares with him the gospel, and Ray Watley gets saved. And he says, I didn't like the circumstances, but it put me in a place where I heard the gospel, and I got saved. And by the way, Ray had heard it multiple times, but it wasn't until then that he finally got saved. This is the details that worked out for this. And he says, I shouldn't have been home. I shouldn't have been home had not terrible things taken place. Now I was. And because of that, God worked out those details in order for Joseph to be exalted, for Ray Watley to be saved. Even for the king in Proverbs 21, verse 1, the Bible says, the king's heart is in the hand of the Lord. As the rivers of water, he turneth it whithersoever he will. The next verse continues with the fact that the ways of man are right in his own eyes. People think they're so wise and they know what they're doing. We're just pawns in God's hand. It's not that we don't have a free will, but God is using those things that we're doing. Even Samson in his terrible decisions he made, marrying somebody or trying to marry somebody that he wasn't supposed to, God had a hand in saying, all right, well, I'm going to let you, but I'm going to use it for my glory. And even the bad things, even bad decisions could be used for God's glory, as so long as they would be yielded to God. Obviously, Joseph yields these things to God. So he's exalted by the choice of God, but also because of the character of Joseph. Joseph was what he should have been. Look at verse number 14, if you will. In verse number 14, when we looked off, we understand that the butler talks about the Hebrew, the young man, this 30-year-old man. In verse number 14, then Pharaoh sent and called Joseph, and they brought him hastily out of the dungeon. In other words, quickly, hey, get out. What's going to happen? All right, so nobody's like, hey, Joseph, here's what's happened. Here, let me give you a run by, play by play. Somebody goes to the prison, opens the door, says, hey, hurry, come on, let's go. And they grab him and say, all right, we need to shave. And so they shave him. All right, this is not a passage for why you're not allowed to have facial hair, by the way. Okay, there's a few of us. It's preached. I've heard this passage preached, by the way, on that. Like, this is why you're not allowed to have facial hair. Stand before the king. Amen. Well, anyways, that's not what it has to do with. But they shaved his face. Anyways, shaved himself and changed his raiment, put on some nice clothes, and came in unto Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, I have dreamed a dream, and there is none that can interpret it. And I have heard say of thee that thou canst understand a dream to interpret it. And Joseph answered Pharaoh, you got the right guy. No. Oh, hey, how come you didn't call me earlier? Here's what he answers. It is not me. God shall give Pharaoh an answer of peace. Joseph is given an opportunity here. Pharaoh talks to Joseph. I don't know what kind of introduction. Hey, I'm Joseph. I've been in your dungeon for a while. I've been living underground for a bit. And there's none of that. That it seems like Joseph is brought forth, and they told him he's a guy that can interpret. Pharaoh says, I need somebody to interpret my dream. Nobody else can do it. And Joseph immediately responds in this humble manner in which he's saying, God can give you this dream. It's not me. God can do it. And yes, I talk to God. I listen to God. And God can do this for you. But ultimately, you have to remember that Pharaoh is not offering Joseph anything. Pharaoh's not saying, hey, if you tell me something, I'll get you out of prison. If you do this, I'm going to put you in charge. We know that's going to happen. But Joseph is just told to do something, and so he does it. There's no promise made. Joseph just humbly responds. Yeah, you're right. You got the right guy. You should have called me first. I mean, come on, why did you waste your time with those guys? You didn't have to lose any sleep. If you had me by your side, I would have answered. In fact, you would have woke up the first time, and I would have told you would have been. No, none of those things. None of those things. Ultimately, here's what he does. He just gives all to God. All glory, all honor, all credit goes straight to God. We understand that Joseph had nothing to lose on his own. He's in prison. He's in prison. What's he going to lose? What if they kill him? He's in prison. Ultimately, that's what he'd end up with. In prison, he would be dead. That's what's going to happen. But he has nothing to lose. The only thing that's on the line is the reputation of God himself. And so long as he's faithful to God, believing in God and what God's word dictates, all he's given up here is God's reputation. I think one of the issues that we have oftentimes with Christianity is we think too much about our reputation, what we can lose. You know, we'll talk about our friends and family members. I talked to a lady yesterday. Matt and I were walking one of these roads back here, knocking on some doors, and a lady walks by and said she'd been to our church one time, and she's wondering if first off, she's wondering at a distance if we were Jehovah's Witnesses. We're like, no, we're not Jehovah's Witnesses. And she said, and she comes from Nigeria, and she was saying that in Nigeria, she would tell everybody about Jesus. She came to America, and they told her, you're not supposed to do that. You don't do that here in America. America, the Christian nation America, you know that one? Here, you're not supposed to tell people about Jesus. This is bad. And that, people have individual rights here, and you shouldn't infringe on those rights by telling them about Jesus. So I thought we were supposed to. And so she was encouraged by the fact that we're out telling people about Jesus, and we should. But you know why we won't? Because of our own rights, of what we're giving up. You know, people are going to think badly of us. Let me ask you, what do you have to lose? Yeah, I get it. You know, certain friendships or certain relationships. It seems like it, perhaps certain job opportunities. I get it. The image, but we have to remember, it's not your name that's on the line. It's the reputation of God. It's Him. It's the saving grace of Jesus. It's about Him. We're not saying that, hey, I can save you. I can only save you so much as I give you the salvation Jesus gives. And that's it. So there's nothing to lose from us. And Joseph had this understanding. There's nothing to lose for him. These rags are but rags for the sake of the glory of God's kingdom. In James chapter 4, verse 10, humble yourselves in the sight of God, and He shall lift you up. Luke chapter 14, verse 11, for whosoever exalteth himself shall be abased, and he that humbleth himself shall be exalted. We feel like we lose so much by humbling ourselves into what God has instructed us, and we don't remember the fact that the exaltation is exaltation before God. That God will one day respond to our work. And He may say to us in our faithfulness, well done, thou good and faithful servant. Could say that. But unfortunately, most of us are content simply to get in so as by fire. Whew, we made it. Didn't do a work for Him. And Joseph had understood something in his humility. He had to work for Jesus. There's no self-promotion. You know, I want you to remember that in the work that you do, if you're teaching a small class, you're teaching a class of 3. We've had times where there's just a few people. One of the classes today promoted 3 of their kids out, so they had 2 people in there. Miss Lori was in there faithfully teaching them. And so we continue in that work, and we do those things. Sometimes it's 2. I remember preaching at church. Came on a Wednesday night one time, and when I took the last church I was at, there was a lot of controversy that had happened. There had been affairs, all sorts, not from me, but like the people before us. And so anyways, I showed up. I'm 22 years old, and people were like, ooh, I wonder what this guy's going to say. And the first Wednesday night, we had 50 people there. And then we had 12 people there. And about a month later, I remember having a Wednesday night service where there was 2 people there. One of them was late. So these 2 ladies that were there, and that was it. There was a kids program going on. We had, a dozen or 20 or so people in the kids program, but this is me preaching to 2 ladies. Kind of awkward, by the way. And I had read something from a pastor that started a church and basically saying, give all you've got to wherever you're at. And so I'm like, all right, here it goes. Message of the century time. And this is the best message I'd ever preached, I think. I don't know. So the point is I just preached my heart out. And I preached long, and I'm like yelling and running around up there, and for these 2 people, there's 2 people. And it's kind of weird when you're trying to apply somebody out there, maybe you or you, I don't know, both of you. But it's awkward there, and having the altar call, if anybody's on your heart, it was strange. But regardless, and I remember when the lady said, you should preach on a Sunday. It's a great message. And I have no idea what the message was. I didn't remember probably the next day. The point was that it's you got to be faithful. If it's 1 or 2, if it's 100, what if the church gets big? So what? The whole point is a humility before God. It has to be before God, and God Himself will do the exaltation. It's for Him, for His glory. There's no self-promotion by Joseph. There's no bit of it. One of the things that bugs me today is with social media, the self-exaltation of preachers drives me crazy. There's no reason for that. For any preacher to be exalting himself, everybody needs to listen to me, and here's what I have to say, my opinion about everything, and it's absolutely everywhere. The wisest and most talented individuals offer nothing to God without humility. There's a reason why God exalts the lowly, because they're allowing God to do that work. And so don't promote yourself. Oftentimes we're tempted to do so. You think about Joseph and what he's going to be offered. He'll be offered prosperity and power and great positions. We could bring out pride, and he will not exalt himself. And continuing on here, look a little further here. He describes what's going to happen. He describes the dream. We're going to read a portion here. Look down in verse number, as Pharaoh explains the dream, verse 25, Joseph said unto Pharaoh, the dream of Pharaoh is one. In other words, it's just got one meaning. God hath showed Pharaoh that he is about to do what he's about to do. The 7 good kine are 7 years. The 7 good ears are 7 years. The dream is one. And the 7 thin and ill-favored kine that came up after them are 7 years, and the 7 empty ears, blasted with the east wind, shall be 7 years of famine. This is the thing which I have spoken unto Pharaoh. What God is about to do, he showeth unto Pharaoh. Behold, there come 7 years of great plenty throughout all the land of Egypt. You're going to have 7 years where everything is going to go great, tons of food everywhere, overabundant amount. Plenty would have the idea you have what you need and some. Verse number 30. And there shall arise after them 7 years of famine, and all the plenty shall be forgotten in the land of Egypt, and the famine shall consume the land. And the plenty shall not be known in the land by reason of that famine following, for it shall be very grievous. And for that the dream was doubled unto Pharaoh twice. It is because the thing is established by God, and God will shortly bring it to pass. The explanation is pretty simple as far as what he describes. 7 years good, 7 years bad. And what this means is that you had it twice. He's saying for sure it's going to happen. This is what you need to know. And by the way, you're not going to escape it. There's going to be parts that are going to be plenteous. They're going to take care of the parts that are bad. Everywhere is going to have this problem. This is how big of a problem it is. So in verse number 33, Joseph speaks to Pharaoh in continuation. He says, now therefore let Pharaoh look out for a man, discreet and wise, and set him over the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh do this, and let him appoint officers over the land, and take up the 5th part of the land of Egypt in the 7 plenteous years. And let them gather all the good of these good years that come, and lay up corn under the hand of Pharaoh, and let them keep food in the cities. And that food shall be for store to the land against the 7 years of famine, which shall be in the land of Egypt, that the land perish not through the famine. And so Joseph tells this interpretation. It says this is what's going to happen. And then he says, Pharaoh, this is what you need to do. Now, he's talking to Pharaoh. He's never had this kind of occasion with Pharaoh. I don't think so. I mean, he worked for Potiphar, but it's unlikely he's had that, like, hey, buddy. No, this is Pharaoh. No doubt he's got some kind of manner in which he's standing before him appropriately below Pharaoh. And he says, this is what it means. 7 years of good, followed by 7 years of bad. Here's what you need to do. You need to get somebody that's going to be in charge of all of it. Make sure you appoint some officers that are going to work underneath him. And you're to store up, best thing to do would be about 20% is what you need to do, 1/5 of everything. Store it up in the cities. Make sure it's kind of spread out so everybody can get to it. Store large quantities of it. And then when the 7 years that are bad come, you can divvy it out then. Everybody will eat. Now, this is Joseph. This is a prisoner. Joseph doesn't have some kind of great position. He interpreted a dream and then said, Pharaoh, this is what you need to do. Now, he's talking a little bit bold. Honestly, this is not really his place to tell Pharaoh what he's supposed to do with it. He wasn't brought in there. Pharaoh didn't say, hey, tell me the dream and then what I should do with it. He says, tell me the dream. And Joseph went a little bit above and beyond. Here's one thing we find about Joseph. With Joseph, he's not just humble, but he's faithful. He's faithful. Why would Joseph be so bold to speak what he should do? Here's why. Because truth was displayed. God makes it very clear what this truth was. He said, this is what you need to do with this truth. We think about the practical application about things. Think about the things that you've been given, the great information you've been provided. Just think about it in the simplicity of just salvation. You've been given the knowledge and the understanding of what salvation is. Are you going forth and telling people? And the Bible says, yes, that all should be saved. But you have to remember that you have to personally apply it to individuals. The Bible describes that all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. But you apply it to individuals. We'll talk to children this week on Friday and Saturday. And on Saturday, we'll ask questions about these kids and demonstrating that they are, in fact, sinners that need Jesus to save them. And we'll make these practical applications. This is how it works. Joseph says this is truth. This is how you need to apply it. This is what needs to be done. This is the manner in which we carry out this truth in our lives. And so Joseph is faithful. The other thing about Joseph is that Joseph is faithful in a diligent manner. The Bible talks about in 2 Peter chapter 1, add to your faith, and it goes through his list. But he says to do so in all diligence. He says that what you're doing so is not just that you do it, but literally that you would do it diligently. He is faithful. Joseph is exalted in his character because of his humility as well as his faithfulness. There is no faithfulness without diligence. The idea of faithfulness is not just something that you do for a long time. Perhaps if you're like me, you've taught a Sunday school class before that you didn't put everything into it. Ever do that before? It happens. And it ought not to be that we just do, oh, but you've been a faithful teacher because you've done this for 75 years. Not so. You're faithful because you're full of faith when you're doing that teaching every single time. That's the only way. There's a diligence to the work that we're doing. Oh, well, you've been at a church for a long time. I remember at the last church we were at, we knew that the Lord was moving us away, but I thought I'd be faithful. And what that meant is that I would just be there for many years, and not so. Faithfulness is not longevity. It's not the duration of time. It has to do with the fullness of faith in which we're doing that work that we're supposed to be doing. And Joseph did so with diligence. He's consistently faithful in what he's doing, applying God's truth. In other words, he said he took this. This is absolutely true. Why? Because this is what God is doing. This is God's message, and it should be known that way. Ultimately, in Joseph, we see that he's faithful, and we see that faithfulness because he did everything like it was important. Faithfulness ought to yield a demonstration of diligence. Think about when he went to go tell his brothers back several chapters ago, back in chapter 36. He goes and tells his brothers, or he goes to check on his brothers because Dad sent him. And when he goes to find his brothers, are they at the city that they were supposed to be in? No, they're far away. So he travels to another city far away because he's diligent about it. It was the most important thing to do. He gets locked up into as a slave, gets put in Potiphar's house, gets put in charge of the household. He's diligent. It's the most important thing that he could do. He goes to prison, and there he's put charge over prisoners, and it's the most important thing he could do. He's faithful about it. You see the butler and the baker who he's serving, he has to take care of their needs. A disgusting task really in prison. And as far as cleaning up and taking care of, making sure they're being fed and all the things are provided. But even then he interprets dreams and helps them out because they're sad in what they're doing. What do we find is that this is the most important thing to do. Let me ask you, in your faith, we believe something. We believe a lot of important things, like the fact that everybody will be forever, right? We believe that? We do. We believe that Jesus is the only one that can save us. We believe it. Then why are we not diligent about this type of work? Are we diligent about the fact that one day you'll stand before Jesus Christ and give an account of why we've done the works that we have done for Him? And yet we're not diligent about those works that we do for Him. It's because faith is not driving us oftentimes. We're driven by our own lusts, our own flesh, our own weaknesses and fears. And what God is saying, you need to be diligent in your faith for me. Joseph demonstrates that. That is why we're faithful in the things we ought to do. Joseph did it consistently. Look, continue on here in this chapter. In this, notice what takes place. Verse 37, the thing was good in the eyes of Pharaoh, in the eyes of all his servants. And Pharaoh said unto his servants, can we find such a one as this is, a man in whom the Spirit of God is? So Joseph is given this position. Look down in verse number 41. Pharaoh said unto Joseph, see, I have set thee over all the land of Egypt. And Pharaoh his hand and put it upon Joseph's hand and arrayed him in a vesture of fine linen and put a gold chain about his neck. And he made him to ride in the second chariot which he had. And they cried before him, bow the knee. And he made him ruler over all the land of Egypt. So he's being paraded around. People are literally bowing before him, everyone. By the way, this is not his family that's bowing. Eventually they'll bow. This is a precursor to that. And anyways, so he's in charge of everything. But if you'll notice what happens in verse 45. And Pharaoh called Joseph's name Zaphnath-Paaneah. I have looked and looked and looked at that word, and there is a difficulty. I've not found consensus. I'm not a professor of, or professional or competent even in anything Egyptian. Okay, so I have no concept on that. On the terminology, there is some Hebrew aspect of it we can understand, but it's actually an Egyptian name, even though the Egyptians are like, no, that's not really an Egyptian name except for the last part. I don't know what it means. There's several ideas here having to do with the fact that he's able to determine the future, but there's also some etymology, some determination as far as the sourcing that has the idea that he is the one that's saving with this information. So it's kind of a savior type title that he's been given. And anyways, and he gave him, so Pharaoh gives him to wife Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, priest of On. I've also looked, I thought it was interesting that she is the daughter of Potiphar, and he used to work for Potiphar, but they're not related. I just thought that was interesting. And Joseph went out over all the land of Egypt, so he gets married. Now, with that, we understand that he marries an Egyptian. He marries a Gentile bride. And verse 46, and Joseph was 30 years old when he stood before Pharaoh, king of Egypt. And Joseph went out from the presence of Pharaoh and went through all the land of Egypt. And in the 7 plenteous years, the earth brought forth by handfuls. And he gathered up all the food of the 7 years which were in the land of Egypt, and laid up the food in the cities, and the food of the field, and which was round about the city, laid he up in the same. And so what he's going to explain is that he gets all this stuff, works it out the way the plan was. Verse 50, and unto Joseph were born 2 sons, before the years of famine came, which Asenath the daughter of Potiphar, priest of On, bare unto him. And Joseph called the name of the firstborn Manasseh. For God, said he, hath made me forget all my toil and all my father's house. So he starts off with something. One of the things we find with Joseph's faith is that even in the naming of his children, he says, forgetting. Manasseh, I've forgotten those things. Now, the concept is not that he didn't know about those, but literally that those things have been put aside. And that's why in the passage that we started with in the book of Philippians earlier in the message is that we are forgetting those things which were behind. And this is what he did. We're going to forget those things which are behind. It doesn't mean that he's just going to stop and like, aha, they should see me now. I can't wait. There's a lot of popular songs out there that talk about old boyfriends and old girlfriends that should see them and their glory and what they accomplished. And Joseph's not that way. Joseph's not thinking, oh, I deserve this. Look what I've been through for these past 13 years because of those guys. Those things are gone. Those things are done. Those things are forgiven. They're in the past. Forgetting those things which are behind, pressing toward those things which are before. In this passage, he has Manasseh. For God said, he hath made me forget. This is something that God accomplished. In verse 52, and the name of the second he called Ephraim, for God hath caused me to be fruitful in the land of my affliction. Now, there are a number of things that we can draw on prophetic reference and things like that with Jesus, but on this part, just practically here, when it comes to what Ephraim is giving, when he has the second child, his reminder here, God has caused me to be fruitful. Look at the fruitfulness. God did it. The whole point is God allowed me to get over my past. By the way, with this, in verse number 51, when he talks about Manasseh, that he's forgotten, I tend to believe at this point what he's saying is that this was something that bugged me for a while. Now, maybe I'm reading more into this, but the concept is this was something there, but in what God has provided, those are in the past. God has demonstrated himself greater than those things that were there. I can push those things back, and now look what God has provided. He has been good. The simplicity of this in Ephraim is this. Yeah, it's rough where we're at, but God's good. In the country of my affliction, nothing was right here. I shouldn't be here by all earthly means, and I never as a teenager thought I'd be going here of all places. But God has caused me to flourish, to be fruitful, to allow these things, to have a great purpose for his glory, even in the land of my affliction, even in Egypt. What a reminder for us. As Christians, the Bible describes persecution that's promised for any who would live godly in Christ Jesus. A land of affliction. This is the promise of any Christian living in this world, that you are living in a land of affliction. But God's been good to allow fruitfulness for you. Think about that. Within any persecution or difficulty, do you realize that within persecution and difficulty in great volume and quantity throughout the world, there's been more fruit in those areas than anywhere else? I mean, just constantly. People getting saved and people being reached for. The more difficulty, the better, seemingly, for the cause of Christ. And so they were given plenty. And they were going to come from the rest of the family. In verse number 57, all countries came unto Egypt to Joseph for to buy corn, because that the famine was sore in all the land. Now, that'll continue on with the rest of the story. We'll have a few more messages from the life of Joseph. But a few things that we can gather by this is that God had a plan for Joseph. And the choice of God is, I've got a plan for you. I've got something for you to do. Now, Joseph didn't understand all of that. The whole point is that he had to wait. His waiting was not wasted because he remained faithful. Ultimately, the character of Joseph was such that he was humble and he was faithful. Those are the two things that are needed for you. So Charity Baptist Church, for you, are you humble and are you faithful? I want God to use me. It's not going to happen without your humility. Now, you can get stuff done in pride, but God will use your humility. This is how it's going to happen. And ultimately, we have to remain faithful to do so. Joseph was humble because he was faithful. He believed, he had faith in God. For that reason, in his faith, he was able to humble himself under the mighty hand of God. And this is why he would continue. He continues to remain a man of faith, as we'll see in the next few chapters, even when he's confronted by his own brothers unknowingly. And by the way, it doesn't mean that anguish is gone. There's going to be times where Joseph's going to break down emotionally. Well, he will just branch off to the side and just let it all out. Even though he's named one of his sons Manasseh, and said, I've forgotten, but when he's reminded, it hurts. What a lesson on bitterness. And in these things, the point is to remain humble and to remain faithful. Let's go ahead and bow our heads, and we'll spend some time in prayer. Give this to the Lord. If you're here today and you say, I don't know for sure if I were to die today that heaven would be my home. The message has not been on salvation, but let me encourage you, the gospel, Joseph's life is picturing something that would happen eventually by someone that would be betrayed, someone that would be sold, and someone that would be given up. That's Jesus Christ, who ended up dying for us, who was buried. He rose again. He won over the grave. He won to give salvation. The Bible says, whosoever shall call upon the name of the Lord, describing the same chapter as Jesus Christ, shall be saved. If you're here today and you don't know for sure heaven's your home, you can call on Jesus right now to save you. God, I'm a sinner. I deserve help, but I believe Jesus died for me. I'm trusting in him to go to heaven. Please save me. He said he would. He would save you. Whatever words you could use to say that thought is that Christ alone could save you. Him alone, not of works that you're accomplishing, literally Christ alone. He said he would save you. If there's anybody in this room that would say with a raised hand, that's me, Pastor, I need to be saved, and I have not been saved. I'd like to be saved today. I've not been saved, and I'd like to be saved. Then how about this? When it comes to faithfulness and humility, if the Lord has spoken to you, worked on your heart about those things for you to be used, why don't you spend some time with the Lord? I'm going to pray, and then I'll give you some time for prayer as we have time of invitation. Lord, we thank you for the time you've given. I thank you for the blessing we have of being here together. Lord, it is good to be with your people. I'm thankful for the life of Joseph, much to learn from him. I'm praying we would learn even more. Give wisdom now as we respond.